Good evening, everyone. I'm Barb Nangle. I'm the founder of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting, and I want to welcome you to my Boundaries webinar tonight. Before we get into it, I want to take a moment and introduce Rosa, and she's going to give a little bit of an intro, and then we'll hop right into the details of the evening. Rosa, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the How to Be Grateful on Thanksgiving by Setting Healthy Boundaries free webinar with Barb Nangle of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. My name is Rosa. I'm a bilingual virtual assistant. I help solo professionals like coaches and attorneys with their project management needs and administrative work, like email and calendar management, document translation, and things like that. If you're not following Barb on Instagram, I highly recommend that you do. Her Instagram is at Higher Power Coaching. I would also like to invite you to listen to her podcast, Fragmented to Whole. I truly love it. If you didn't submit your question ahead of time, please leave a comment, and Barb will respond to your question live if there's time. She's also doing a raffle at the end of the webinar. So if you're registered and you're here with us tonight, let us know by dropping a comment and you'll be able to participate. Okay, Barb, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much. And also, even if you didn't register and you're here tonight, leave a comment, excuse me, and then your name will go in the drawing, which will happen at the end. But you do have to be present to win. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm really excited that you're here tonight because I used to not have boundaries myself, and I learned how to develop boundaries over time and through my process of 12-step recovery. And it has made all the difference in the world. And I've learned over time that I have the ability to articulate my experience in creating boundaries in a way that's really helpful for other people. And I've done a lot of reading and a lot of work on it. And so I've also have the ability to present things in a visual manner that seems to be helpful to people. I know that I really learn very well visually. Before I start with the PowerPoint presentation and get into all the things that we're going to talk about, I want to stay on screen for a minute because you're not going to see me so much when I put the PowerPoint up. Because I want to start by telling you the two most important things that I've learned about boundaries. And the first one is when people say to me, how is it that you were able to create boundaries? Like what was the thing? And I'm like, it's so many things that went into me being able to create boundaries. But I would say the core of it has to do with that I've learned to care more what I think of me than what other people think of me. And so this doesn't mean that I don't care what other people think of me. What it means is that I care about myself and about being an honest woman of integrity more than I do what you might think of me. So, what I'm talking about is a lot of what I did before having boundaries and before recovery was people pleasing. So, I would say, oh, absolutely, I'm happy to do that. And no, I don't mind when I minded. And I really wasn't happy to do it. And so that's actually called lying. And I didn't really realize that. And so I don't do that anymore. I don't try to manipulate people into liking me or thinking things about me by bending over backwards to take care of them. I tell the truth now. So when I say I care more what I think of me, I mean I care more about being an honest woman of integrity than I do about you or anybody else thinking certain things about me. So of course I want people to like me, but if the choice is I like me or you like me, I pick me. I'd really like for both of us to like me. And so having boundaries really enables me to do that, and being able to do that enabled me to have boundaries. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. The other really important thing, which I really only understood on reflection, is that having safe, caring others that you're connected to when you're in the process of learning how to set boundaries is really important. So, one of my recovery programs that I'm in, we talk about self abandonment. It's one of the things that we've done. A lot of people will use language like self sabotage or I don't show up for myself or I don't follow through. for myself. And I think it's important in this 12-step recovery program to stick with the language of the program, which is self-abandonment. And I realize now that one of the reasons setting boundaries in the beginning for me was so difficult was that I didn't have healthy models of separation. And so setting a boundary with someone felt like abandonment. And it was because I'm the one that initiated it, it felt like abandonment, whether I was benefiting from it or not. So I hope that that makes sense to you. But in any case, one of the ways we can feel like we're not being abandoned is make sure that we're connected to somebody else. So when I started setting boundaries, I was doing the 12 steps with 3 other women, and we would talk together about where we needed to set a boundary, who we needed to set with, how we were going to do it, what we were going to say, and all that. And I realize now that was absolutely imperative for me. So here's what I'm going to give you as a trick. So have a caring person that you are talking about that knows that you want to set a boundary, and have them help you think through like what's the right language for you personally to use. And then maybe the day that you're going to set a boundary, and I'm talking about this as if you've never set a boundary before and the first time. The more you do it, the less you're going to need to do this sort of thing. But if it's new behavior for you, so you'll talk to them the day that you're going to set the boundary. Maybe you call them on the phone, and if you're feeling anxious and you have any kind of discomfort or uncomfortable feelings, which you probably will, you talk to them about it. And then you hang up the phone, and then you go and you meet with the person and you set the boundary. And then when you're done, you reconnect with your caring, safe other person. So that does a few things. One, when you have your difficult emotions, you're processing them with your safe and caring person before and after. You're not doing it with the person that you set boundaries with, because when you get the emotions in there, it's going to be really hard to kind of stick to your guns and follow through for yourself. Two, you will know, even if it's just on a subconscious level, even if you can't remember consciously, there's somebody out there that knows what I'm going through, but you will at least subconsciously know somebody's with me. I'm not entirely alone. Somebody out there, they know where I'm going and know what I'm doing. So what we call this is bookending. So you bookend before and after. So this is a handy tool whenever you're doing anything difficult. And it can be as simple as I text somebody before I do something and after I do something, or it could be as I go and talk with them or I pick up the phone. It really depends on how important it is. So those are my two really big, huge things that I always like to start off with. And I'm going to share my screen now and go into the PowerPoint presentation where I'm going to have some visuals, etc. And here we go. All right. Can you see the full slide there, Rosa? Okay,
Yes.
great.
Yes,
So
I can.
welcome everybody to How to Be Grateful on Thanksgiving by Setting Boundaries Now. And again, I'm Barb Nangle, founder of Higher Power Coaching and Consulting. So we already did our introductions. So I just want to let you know what's going to happen. I'm going to go through a series of freedoms that you can have from setting boundaries at Thanksgiving. Then I will cover a bunch of principles of boundaries. Then I'm going to give you some concrete tips for how to set boundaries. Then I'm going to actually apply those tips and give you some scripts for what to say. And those will be applied to some of these freedoms I'm talking about. And then if we have time at the end, I will answer any questions that you submit in the comments. If I don't have time, go ahead and submit them anyway, because I'll get back to you. And then we're going to have some giveaways. And again, I want you to stick around until the end, because you can't win if you're not here. So here we go. So here are some freedoms that you can have. I want you to know that it's okay to not go home for Thanksgiving. And that means now during the COVID environment or anytime, you get to decide. It's okay to change Thanksgiving traditions, even if you're the one who's always been hosting and you've done it the same way for 30 years. It's okay. It's okay to do what you want for Thanksgiving. So if your family always goes out for dinner and you really want to have dinner at home, you can do that. You don't have to do what everybody else does all the time. You don't have to spend Thanksgiving with people you don't like or who make you feel unsafe. You can choose to stay home alone for the holidays if you want, whether it's Thanksgiving or any other time. You don't have to host Thanksgiving this year or ever, even if you always have. And even if you already said you would, you can change your mind. You're allowed to do that. You don't have to live up to other people's expectations for Thanksgiving or ever, really. It's okay to refuse affection from family on Thanksgiving or at any time. If you are not a hugger or a toucher or a kisser, you don't have to. Or if there's one particular family member that skeeves you out, you do not have to take their affection. You can refuse it. It's okay to stay at a hotel instead of at your family's home on Thanksgiving. It's okay if they're not okay with that too. You don't have to talk about subjects that are private or that make you uncomfortable at Thanksgiving. So this could be if someone is asking you when you're going to get married, when you're going to have children, how much money you make, or if they're talking about politics or they're, saying racist things or something, you don't have to talk about any of that stuff. It's okay to ask for what you really want and need during the holidays. And I mean this concretely in terms of like if there's certain types of gifts that you want for the holidays, or I really just want to relax, or I'd really like a day to myself. It's whatever you want and need. You can ask for that. And it's okay if people get mad at you for setting boundaries on Thanksgiving. That it's going to happen sometimes. That's the reality. You don't have to stay the whole time for Thanksgiving if you don't want to. You can come late and you can leave early. You get to do those things. And you don't have to explain yourself if you've changed Thanksgiving traditions. You can choose to do that if you want to, but you don't have to. All right, so we're past, those are some of the freedoms that I want you to know that you can have for Thanksgiving. And now we're going to go into some more of the principles of boundaries. So I love this quote. I don't know who this person, Prentice Hemphill, is, but boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. So at the beginning, I mentioned how I care more what I think of me than what other people do. So I didn't really care what I thought about myself. It was okay with me to not have integrity. But with boundaries, I get to love me and you. I'm not resentful of other people because they're, quote, walking all over me, because I was actually allowing that to happen. And I want to give you this. Your boundaries are an open invitation for true intimacy and connection because they reflect to others who you truly are in the moment. So people who don't have good boundaries often think, oh, if I put up boundaries, it's going to be a wall and they're going to be closed off. And I love the wording here, open invitation. And this really resonates with my experience too, that I can be truly intimate and truly connected with other people when I'm real with them, when I tell them the truth and I say things like, I don't really want to talk about that, or I'd rather not go there, or not tonight. So I'm showing them who I really am when I set boundaries. And that is what enables me to have true intimacy and be really connected for real with people. And I want to also remind you, it is never your job to convince anyone to understand your boundaries. Choosing to no longer over-explain and justify your boundary is a boundary in itself. And you get to decide. There are some times when I set boundaries and I explain, and sometimes I don't. All right, so points to remember when you're starting new behavior. So I'm assuming that you're here because you have difficulty with boundaries and maybe it's the beginning of you setting setting boundaries. But when it comes to any new behavior that we're engaging in, it's really helpful to remember a few things. One is anything worth doing is worth doing badly at first. So think about it. When you started walking, you didn't get up and just start walking. You fell, you crawled, you toddled, you got up and you fell back down. So in order to get good at something, you've got to do it poorly in the beginning. And so some people are afraid to set boundaries because they don't know how to do it. And the thing is, you're going to mess up. And it's in the messing up that you learn how to get better at it. It's one of those things, like you can read all the books in the world you want about riding a bike, and you can have all the knowledge in the world, but until you get on the bike and start riding it, it doesn't matter what people are telling you. You have to actually do it. It's the same thing with setting boundaries, and really with much of the human behavior that we want to change. And I actually want to say also that if you are on this webinar and you've registered for it, or you're on my email list, you're automatically going to get a copy of this recording and the slides. So you don't necessarily have to take notes if you don't want to, because you are going to get a copy of the slides. Another thing to remember when you're changing new behavior is you don't get better at something by not doing it. So the way to get better at setting boundaries with people is to set boundaries with people. And that's just the way that it is. And somebody in the world of entrepreneurship actually told me this when I started my coaching business. I was like, I don't know what to do. She's like, start coaching people. You know, the only way you're going to get better at coaching people is by coaching people. And it's really true. I'm much better now than I was back then. And I'm sure I'll be better 10 years from now. But you don't get better at something by not doing it. So the way to get better at setting boundaries is to set boundaries. And then this is true of any change behavior process. It's a slow process. Quitting won't speed it up. So maybe there's some of you out there who tried setting boundaries before and it didn't really work, so you gave up. Well, quitting didn't speed up that process. You're no better at it. So just give yourself time and don't allow yourself to quit. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. All right, now we're going to get into some of the principles of boundaries. So I like to think of boundaries more like fences than like walls. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of times when people don't have boundaries and they're afraid to set them, they're like, I don't want to put walls between me and people. And walls are not good. We don't want walls. We want something that's flexible. And the thing about walls is that not only do they keep out the bad, they also keep out the good. And I'm going to talk more about letting in the good pretty soon. So boundaries are flexible, so they change over time under different circumstances and with different people. And so as you build trust with someone, for example, you're likely to relax your boundaries with them because you know, like the trust is the thing that stands in there. You don't have to kind of keep them at such a distance because you know that they're a safe person. Having a healthy boundary is like having a fence with a gate in it. So this is my best depiction of a fence with a gate in it. So it opens from the inside only. In other words, you're the gatekeeper. Other people are not. So you're in charge of your boundary and other people are not in charge of your boundary. You decide who or what gets in. You're the gatekeeper. And boundaries without consequences are not boundaries. They're hopes and wishes. Let me say that again. Boundaries without consequences are not boundaries. They're hopes and wishes. They don't work like an invisible dog fence. So you can't just decide, I have a boundary and expect that people are either going to read your mind about it or that they will necessarily respect your boundary the first time. And there's a whole bunch of reasons that people might not respect your boundaries. Some people might not respect your boundaries because they forgot, because they've known you for years and you've never been that way before, so they're not used to it. Some people might not respect your boundary because they don't necessarily believe that you mean it because you've never done it before and they're kind of testing you. Some people won't respect your boundaries because they don't care. There's a whole host of reasons, and you may think you know why they're not respecting your boundaries, but you don't really know for sure. And I like to give this rather easy example that I think most people can understand. So let's say you work in an office that by yourself and you have a door on your office. And even if the door is open and your new boundary is, I would like for people to knock before they come in, even if the door is open. So if you tell all your colleagues, I have a new policy, and that is that I really want people to knock on my door, even if the door is open before they come in. So when somebody comes in and they don't knock and you don't say anything, then it wasn't really a boundary. It was just a dream or a wish that you had. But you have to actually do something and say, excuse me, I really would like for you to knock. And if they go, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'll make sure I do it next time. And then next time they do it, yay. But then say the next time they come in and they don't do it, say, I just want to remind you that I actually want you to knock before coming in the door. And then maybe the next time if they do it and they don't come in, then you can say something like, all right, stop, turn around, come knock on the door. All right, great. So you're literally training them, like having them go through the motion that you're really serious. So this is what I mean when I say consequences. And there's a whole gamut of things that could be consequences, but this is an example that most people can really comprehend. All right. So we want to shift the focus from others, from what must I do for others? This was me, people pleasing, to what must I do for myself? And this isn't just so I can be selfish. Honestly, I am a much more giving person now that I have boundaries because I take good care of myself and I have a lot more energy than I did before. So I still want to do things for others, but I have to take care of myself first. So instead of thinking, how is this going to affect them? Think, how is it going to affect me? This is where we're shifting. We're going inside the boundary here. Okay, this is something I got from a friend of mine in recovery. I found this to be absolutely brilliant. So if you had a rundown house or a vacant lot, the chances of you putting a fence around it or putting a boundary around it are pretty slim because you don't care about it. So you're not going to put a boundary around something that you don't value. But if you were to put all kinds of money into fixing up the property and you got it landscaped and you had a contractor over and you had pavers put in and a new stairway and all that, you'd be much more likely to put a fence around it or to put a boundary around it. So a big part of being able to establish boundaries is that you have to actually give a shit about yourself. That's really what it's about. And my experience with setting boundaries was like this kind of iterative process where I set a boundary and I feel good about myself because I took care of myself. And then it's easier to set a boundary because I feel better about myself. And then I can set the next boundary and it kind of rolls on itself. So I'm not going to talk so much about like how you get to feel better about yourself. There's a lot of things you can do, including setting boundaries, but you have to remember if you don't care about yourself, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to set and enforce boundaries. So keep that in mind. That's really important. All right. So one of the other questions I get from people is how do you know where to set the boundary? And I've thought about it and I've realized, well, here's how I've decided where to set boundaries. I decide, how do I want to live my life? What do I want from my life? And then I set boundaries around it. What do I need to have in place so that I can have the kind of life that I want? And one of the measures for me of the way I want to live my life is I want peace. I want to be relaxed. I don't want to be running 50 million miles an hour. I don't want to be worried all the time about whether other people are thinking. So what kind of boundaries do I need to put in place to be able to have peace? So we're talking about Thanksgiving here. So one of the ways that you can decide where the boundary is going to be is decide how you want to spend Thanksgiving. So here are some ways that some people might want to spend Thanksgiving. They might want it to be festive and joyful. They might want to feel like they're in community and have hope and faith and togetherness. And of course, be grateful and be trusting and have fun and relaxed and be of service and have it be safe and be carefree and be thankful and honor tradition. So those are the ways we want to celebrate our holiday. Then we quote, draw a boundary around that. In other words, what do I need to have in place so that I can have all of those things? And those are just examples, of course. That's not what you have to have. And those aren't necessarily all the things that I want to have for Thanksgiving. But you know where the boundary goes because the boundary allows you to relax and enjoy the holidays. So, for example, one of the freedoms I mentioned earlier was it's okay to stay at a hotel instead of at your family's house for the holidays. So let's say that, your family has pets and your spouse has allergies, and there's always like a war with your family because your spouse is really uncomfortable, and you want your spouse to be able to be relaxed, and they're not going to be able to do it at your parents' house or your family's house because of the pet. So one of the ways we're going to be able to be relaxed on the holiday is by staying in a hotel. So that's an example. All right, more principles of boundaries. So boundaries, quote, draw lines between what's mine and what's not mine. So in this case, I'm inside the boundary. This is me. It's my property. It's not your property. It's not other people's property. I own it. So that includes my feelings, my attitudes, my behaviors, and my choices. So they're my feelings, not yours. They're my attitudes, not yours. They're my behaviors and my choices. I'm in charge of them. You are not in charge of them. And then everything outside of the boundary is other people's property. It is not my property. And this includes other people's feelings, other people's attitudes, other people's beliefs, and other people's choices. So, what do I mean by that? Here are some examples. Other people's happiness or misery is not my property. It is not my job to cheer people up when they're miserable. It is not my job to make people happy. That's their property, not mine. Other people's abusive and dysfunctional behaviors are not mine. Now, if they're being abusive and dysfunctional to me, that's my business and I can leave and I should leave. But it's not up to me to turn people into functional, thriving people. If they're dysfunctional people, it's not my job to change them. Other people's inability to be loving, caring, and nurturing. You can't turn someone into a loving and caring and nurturing person. It doesn't matter what you do. That's their property. That's not your property. Other people's consequences are yours. So one of the things that people talk about in 12-step recovery is enabling behavior. And what that means is we enable people, for example, let's say the person was an alcoholic, we enable their alcoholism by doing things like cleaning up after them and making it easy for them to drink. Right. So their consequences are theirs, not ours. So let's say your loved one like throws up all over themselves and passes out. If you just leave them like that, they have to deal with those consequences. It's not your job to clean them up and get them to bed and all that kind of stuff. Just they have natural consequences to their behavior. That's their property, not yours. Other people's health and wealth is not yours. So if you have someone in your life that doesn't take care of their health and it really worries you, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't make someone take care of their health. That's their property. And if someone is not taking care of their finances, that is their property. It is not your property. Other people's guilt. It's not your job to assuage other people's guilt if they're feeling guilty. Other people's problems are not your problems. If you choose to, I would say specifically if they asked you for help, that's one thing. But if you decide other people have problems, I should be helping them. I would be a bad person if I didn't. It's really their property. It's not your property. Now, if they ask you for help and you want to if you want to help them and you have the ability to help them, have at it. But it should be a choice that you're making, not an obligation, and it should be something they've actually asked you to do. But otherwise, not your property. Excuse me. Other people's addiction and dysfunction is not your property. You can't turn someone into a functional person. You can't stop someone else's addiction. It doesn't matter how much you love them. It's a disease. Other people's hopes and dreams are their property. You don't have to make other people's dreams come true. All right. So just to reinforce, the things inside the boundary are my responsibility, and the things outside are not my responsibility. So that's what the boundary delineates. That's what it shows me the difference between. All right. So now I want to talk about something boundaries of self-protection and boundaries of self-containment. So I first heard of this concept when I heard a speaker say after his many years of recovery that he has boundaries of self-containment and boundaries of self-protection. He didn't explain what he meant, and I was like, oh my God, my mind is blown. And I just have spent a few years really thinking about, like, what does this mean exactly? So this is my best depiction of what boundaries of self-containment might look like. So these are things that I'm trying to contain. And I'm going to give you examples from my life. This doesn't mean that you would have these same things. So for example, I used to give away personal and private information to people. I need to contain that stuff. I used to give unsolicited advice all the time. So, for example, I was never, until now, I was never in a healthy, functional romantic relationship. I gave relationship advice all the time to people. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I need to contain that. I have an inner critic. As soon as I hear it, I need to contain that. I don't complain. If I'm complaining, it means I think I know better than God does. So I need to contain that. I used to over explain everything. And honestly, what that was about was me trying to get people to agree with me because that's what I wanted. I don't make excuses anymore. I have to contain that. Either I have a reason for something or I apologize. I don't make excuses. Criticism, it's the same thing with complaints. If I give criticism, it's because somebody actually asked me to give them criticism, not because I'm just doing it. I need to contain that stuff. TMI, too much information. So I was told too much information, Barb, for years before TMI was ever a saying. So I need to contain that stuff. My negative self-talk, very similar to the inner critic. As soon as I realize it's happening, I need to contain that stuff. My thoughts. I actually had a boss one time who said to me, Barb, did your mom tell you that you had to verbalize every single thought you ever had in your head? She did not. Rescuing and fixing other people. I need to contain that behavior. That's what I did before recovery. That was boundaries is what's really helped me with that it's not my business. That's their property. And quick trust. I used to trust anybody immediately. And now I understand that trust is something that is built over time. So these are things that I need to contain. And gossip is another one. This was a real I didn't even know that was what I was doing, but I have to contain that stuff. So now I want to talk about boundaries of self-protection. So this is my best depiction of things that I need to keep away from me and protect myself from. Actually, before I go on to that, I do want to make one point here. Now, these boundaries of self-containment, some of them are things that if I contain them, I'm protecting me. So for example, when I don't give out personal and private information, I don't make myself vulnerable to people before I really know whether they're trustworthy or not. Okay. So that protects me. When I contain gossip, I'm both protecting myself, like my reputation, because I don't gossip anymore. And I'm not spreading chaos and turmoil and dysfunction out in the world. Right. So some of these boundaries of self-containment are self-protective, and some of them protect the rest of the world and the people around me. Right. So containment boundaries are both for me and for other people. Boundaries of self-protection are pretty much for me. So I need to protect myself from mean people. I just don't want to be around them. I can't be around substance users, untrustworthy people. I used to trust untrustworthy people all the time. And then I would blame them for being untrustworthy. And I know now, don't trust them. I think I thought, I don't know, maybe if I loved them enough, they would turn into a trustworthy person. I need to protect myself from the news. It is not good for my mental health for me to pay attention to the news. And so I don't. It's something that I need to do to take care of myself. I need to stay away from dysfunctional environments, unguarded time. So I used to give my time away to people all the time. And now I'm very guarded with my time. I schedule my time. I leave the ringer off on my phone, so that I am not at the whim of every time a notification goes off on my phone or I get a text message or a phone call or whatever. I decide what my time is going to be like. I don't hang around unsafe people, yellers and screamers, can't deal with it. I come from a rather dysfunctional family. So one of the ways that I protect myself is by limiting the amount of time that I spend with them. So my boundary is time. I got to protect myself from other people's business. That was where I spent all my time before recovery. I got to stay away from that, out of other people's business. I got to stay away from abusive people, politics, needy people, clingy people. The way that I protect myself from those kind of people is also time. I spend very little time with them. I have to stay away from drugs, alcohol, and sugar. That doesn't work for me. I need to protect myself from that and from toxic situations and just negativity in general. And as I mentioned, I've realized over time that boundaries of self-containment are also boundaries of self-protection. All right, so where are your property lines? I want you to think about these different things as being property that you own. They're resources that you have. So you have love, you have money, you have time, and you have energy. And these are your property. And where you have the boundary on these different things are going to depend on who you are. So one of the things I've learned over time is that time is my most precious resource, because I can generate more love, I can generate more money, and I can generate more energy, but I can't generate more time. So I have very strict boundaries around my time and not as strict boundaries around my energy and my money and my love. But that might be different for you. You might be someone who is like, I have a really strict boundary on my money, or I have a really strict boundary on my energy so that I can do these other things. So I want you to start thinking about these things as your property, and think about if you're letting go of these resources too much. So are you giving away your love, compassion, and forgiveness too much and not holding on to any of it for yourself? Are you giving away your time so that you're run ragged and have no time to play and have fun in your life? Are you giving away your money to others to either buy their affection or to rescue them or save them because they, quote, need you? Are you self-supporting through your own contributions? That's one of the things we say in 12-step recovery. And are you letting other people be self-supporting through their own contributions? And have you given away all of your energy so you have none left for yourself? And are you trying to restore that by drinking coffee or smoking cigarettes or some other kind of substance? So I urge you to think about these different resources as your property, and you get to decide like how much gets in and how much gets out, what you're going to give away and what you're not. All right. So I'm slipping a commercial in here, and that is for a pilot program that I am about to launch in January called 6 Weeks to Better Boundaries with Barb. It's a group coaching program, and it's for you if you feel guilt and shame when you try to set boundaries, if you set boundaries and then immediately take them back, if you're tired of being taken advantage of, if you feel disrespected and dismissed by others, if you're afraid of what others might think. After participating in 6 Weeks to Better Boundaries with Barb, you'll be able to replace the masks you've used to protect yourself with boundaries. You'll be able to distinguish between what's your property and what's other people's property. You'll be able to let the good things in that nurture you and keep out the bad things that harm you. You'll be able to develop boundaries of self-containment and self-protection, and you'll be able to hold on to your resources of love, money, time, and energy. Oh, one more point on here. The group is for you if you're constantly going against your own values and not living in a way that makes you feel proud. So just real quick details about the program. It's 6 90-minute live weekly group coaching sessions via Zoom. There'll be a multimedia curriculum with weekly exercises, a community of boundary builders and boundary buddies. It's a $13.50 value. I am normally going to sell it for $700, but because this is a pilot, it's only $350. But wait, there's more. Oh yeah, Tuesdays, January 5th through February 9th from 4:30 to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you are one of my current clients, it's free. If you're a former client, it's only $200. And for anybody attending the webinar tonight, you can get to the first 5 people who say I'm in the comments can get 20% off. I will send you a coupon code and you'll get 20% off of the $350 price. So make sure if that's something that you're interested in, that you put that in the comments. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program. So now we're going to go into some of the tips for setting boundaries for the holidays. Tip number 1, do it promptly. So a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to wait for the right moment. There isn't a right moment. Actually, there is. It's now. That's the time. So setting limits doesn't get easier if you wait. In fact, my experience is that it actually gets harder if you wait. So as soon as something happens, you say, nope, that's not going to work for me. All right. So you want to respond as quickly as makes sense. It not only is respectful of them, but it gives you peace of mind because you're not thinking like, oh my God, I have to tell them, when am I going to do it? Blah, blah, blah. You do it and you get it over with. You bite the bullet. You want to be polite. Even if the person has been rude to you, be polite. So for example, if somebody has invited you for Thanksgiving, you don't want to go, thank them for inviting you. So politeness, I like to think of it as like the grease on the wheels of social interaction. And you get to decide how you're going to live your life. And being a polite person is good and kind. Don't lie. Don't blame other people. Just tell the truth. And if you can't be completely honest, then just say something like, no, thank you. I'm going to decline, and say nothing else. But you don't need to lie. Remember, we want to have integrity. We want to care more what we think about us than what other people think about us. And we have to be someone who tells the truth to do that. Don't apologize. You haven't done anything wrong. It is not wrong for you to set a boundary. So even if someone is trying to make you feel guilty, you don't have to feel guilty. If you want to apologize for missing something, like somebody, like, your niece invited you to her play, you could say, oh goodness, honey, I'm so sorry, I'm going to miss it. But you're not apologizing for setting the boundary. You're apologizing for missing the event. All right. Depersonalize it. This is one of my favorites. I love this one. When you say things like, I have a new policy, or I no longer blah, 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 then you make it about you and not about the other person. So if you could say, I have a new rule, like I have a new rule. I don't give presents to friends for the holidays anymore, just my family. Or I have a new rule where I want people to knock on my door before they come in. And then it's not about the person, it's about you, because we want to keep the focus on ourselves when it comes to our boundaries. The other thing you can do is give an alternative. There's a couple of ways we can do that. So if somebody says, I really want you to come over for Thanksgiving dinner, and you can't, you could say something like, well, maybe we can come over for dessert, or maybe, once the coronavirus situation is all taken care of, we can get together for a really nice meal. If it's not about that, think about another way that you can compromise. So if you don't want to do the thing that they want, think about, well, what can I do? I recommend personally that rather than waiting for them to say, what can you do, offer something, because that means you sort of like set the terms of what's going to happen. So instead of waiting for them to say, what can you do? You can say, well, I can't do that, but I can contribute money. Or I can't be on the committee to plan the event, but I'll be there that night to do cleanup and set up, something like that. And then buy time. So this says not making snap decisions. The way I think of it is pausing. I've learned to pause and allow myself to think through things. I'm trying to become an actor rather than a reactor in my life. So if somebody needs an answer right now, you can say to them, I'm afraid it's going to be no if you need an answer right now. I actually just did this with somebody recently. I said, if you need to know right now, it's going to have to be no. But if I have a few days to think about it, I can let you know. But it's not possible for me to make the decision. So, and this, again, notice how it says have a personal policy. You can use 2 of these rules at one time. Depersonalize it by saying, I have a policy of not making snap decisions. And then you don't make a snap decision. All right. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to apply some of these tips to some of the freedoms that we talked about. So for the freedom, it's okay to change holiday traditions. Here's what you might say. I'm not going to blank this year. I'd like to try something new. It doesn't mean I don't value our old traditions. It means I want to create some new traditions. And honestly, you could stop right after it says, I'd like to try something new. You wouldn't have to keep going. So there's no lying. This is the truth. It's prompt. And I recommend you, if this is you where you are going to change a holiday tradition, that you do it tomorrow, maybe even tonight. Do it as quickly as possible. And it's polite and there's no apology given. So it's not rude. It's like, no, I'm not, you're not yelling and screaming at the person. You're just being polite and you're not apologizing. It's okay to not go home for Thanksgiving. So you might say something like, I'm not going to make it this year, Mom. I know you're disappointed. I am too. When quarantine is over, we'll make time to come visit. It's prompt. So if this is you and you haven't yet made your decision about Thanksgiving, which is 1 week from today, then I encourage you to make that phone call tonight or tomorrow. An alternative is given and it's polite and the person didn't apologize. All right. You don't have to talk about subjects that are private or that make you uncomfortable at Thanksgiving or ever. So you might say something like, I don't discuss that with other people, or I'm uncomfortable with this conversation. Let's change the subject. I just had this conversation with somebody the other day on the phone where they went into some whole thing about the environment right now. And I said, I'm really not comfortable talking about that with you or really anybody right now. So I'd like to change the subject. And it was like not even a speed bump. It just, they didn't even say, okay, it just happened in the conversation. So there's no lying. It's the truth. It's prompt. So the issue is addressed right when it's happening. And you don't have to endure the discomfort of a conversation you don't want to have when you nip it in the bud. You stop the person right at the time. So this could be having to do with things like, like when people are trying to have children and they get asked like every time, like, when are you going to have kids? Or did you get pregnant yet? Or whatever. And a really good way to nip that is to say, I don't discuss that with other people. And you can just keep repeating it if they keep pushing. And this is polite and there's no apology given. All right. So we're at the point in the program where we're going to do some giveaways, which means I have to stop sharing my screen, which means that a couple of the other slides aren't going to go. So you know what we're going to do? I'm going to put a pause on this for a second because I have 2 more slides. So if you have a question for me, it looks like I am going to have time to answer some questions. You can go ahead and put them in the comments. And then if you could also put in the comments, what was the most helpful thing you learned in this webinar? It's helpful for me to know what's helpful for you, because what I think is the most helpful isn't necessarily. And then the other thing I wanted to let you know is that the CDC, the Center for Disease and Control and Prevention, has some consideration for winter holidays. So I have the link here, but it'd be easier to just Google CDC holiday celebrations if you want to know what their recommendations are, because maybe you feel like you need to share that with your family. I just wanted you to know that that was there. So before I take myself off before I take the slideshow off the screen, I'm going to give away 3 things. The first one is a booklet called Boundaries for Codependence by Raquel Lerner. The second one is a book called Constructive Living by David Reynolds. If any of you have ever heard the term act as if, which is very popular in 12-step recovery, this is the book on how to act as if. So a good example is somebody comes into recovery, they hear that it's a spiritual program, and they say, I don't really believe in anything spiritual. And they're told, well, act as if you do. You don't have to believe it, just do the behaviors and act as if. And do the things that people are doing that that our spiritual people do, and you'll see some results from that. And this book is a fantastic book, and it's really not that long. It's only about 100 pages. Somebody gave it to me, and I think I had it in my bathroom for 2.5 years. I put it there because then I could read little bits at a time. I had it for 2.5 years before I picked it up, and it is such a gem. And then the third prize, the person gets to pick. Either they get 2 55-minute coaching sessions with me, which is a $300 value, or they get a free membership into 6 weeks to Better Boundaries group coaching with me, which is a $1,350 value. So I am going to stop sharing my screen now and get back with all of you. All right, Rosa. So if you registered for this and you're here tonight, Rosa has you on a list. If you were not registered, I hope you just said hi or something in the comments so that we know that you're here. So Rosa has a random number generator, and she's going to pick the people who get the prizes. So the first thing we're going to give away is this booklet that I have upside down right now. It's called Boundaries for Codependence by Raquel Lerner. It's one of the first things that I found about boundaries that, my personal copy has all kinds of underlining and highlighting, and I found it to be exceedingly helpful. So Rosa, tell us who is the winner of the Boundaries for Codependence booklet.
Okay, so the first winner is Hope Muffet.
All right, Hope. Woohoo! Great. I'll be sure to get that to you, Hope. Do you see she had Batman on her?
Yes.
Her icon there? Awesome.
That's awesome.
All right, and the second giveaway is the book Constructive Living. And what it says, outgrow shyness, depression, fear, stress, grief, chronic pain. Achieve the goal of constructive living to do everything well.
Okay, so there's 2 people that have made comments, and the other person is Haley, who's also saying that she's in for the coaching program. So
awesome. All right, fantastic. So she's the one who got the book?
I mean, she can get the book. She's also saying that she's in for the coaching program.
Okay. Well, she might win the coaching program though. So that's the thing.
Okay.
Great. So do the drawing for the book.
Okay. Hold on a second. So even if they're not with us right now, I can pick a number.
No, they have to be here tonight to get the book.
Okay. So only Haley and Hope had said hello. I don't see any other comments. So I don't know.
Okay, wait. So they might be the only ones here. Okay, got it. Okay. Well, that's okay. I don't know what to do.
Me neither.
Well, it seems to me that that because Hope won the other booklet, that Haley should get this one.
Sure.
Okay. All right, and then in terms of the either the 2 coaching sessions or the 6-week thing, so it's one of the 2 of them that's going to get it.
Okay, so I think it should go to Haley because she's saying that she's in for the program. Okay. So.
All right, fantastic. So Haley, but she actually gets to choose if she wants to do my guess is she'll pick the coaching sessions, but I will connect with you, Haley, to make sure, not the coaching sessions, the 6 weeks to Better Boundaries with Barb. That is fantastic. Yeah, I'm really excited about that.
And she actually has a question. Okay. So the question is, what do you recommend when you set a boundary right away, but a close family member keeps on pushing against the boundary?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the circumstances, but it's up to you to push back. I call those pushback behaviors, and it's natural that people do that. This is what people do, especially if we've never set boundaries before. And you just have to decide, like, how far am I willing to go? So, for example, my example is I have a family member who simply cannot not talk about politics. And I said to them, listen, when we get together for Thanksgiving specifically, I really don't want to talk about politics. And like 4 times I said, I don't want to talk politics. And it was really clear that he was incapable of not talking about politics. Like, he's a really messed up person. So the way I handle that is actually, at this point, I don't see him on Thanksgiving anymore. But like the next time I was like, I'm going to go there rather than come here, have him come here, because I can leave when I'm there. And if it gets too heated, then I'm out. So I have to decide for myself, like, how important is this relationship to me? And how important is this boundary for me? But usually we have to push back. And I'm doing this in a gentle manner, because most of the time, if people are not respecting our boundaries, it's because they just don't know any better. It's not because they're evil or they're bad. But every once in a while, you have a person who is really toxic. And in those cases, sometimes you actually need to be rude to people. So I've heard people say, like, sometimes people in recovery will say, no is a complete sentence. Well, no is a complete sentence when somebody's being a dick to you. Okay. But if somebody is a good and kind and caring person, then no, thank you. No isn't a complete sentence. So it really depends on the situation. So if there's more that you want to say about that, if that hasn't answered your question, Haley, go ahead and put that into the comments. We have 4 minutes left. Is there another question?
No more questions, just a comment.
Okay.
Thank you so
good.
much.
Yay! Me too. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we're done then, if nobody has any other questions. And Haley, I will be in touch with you. You will be getting a code that you'll have to go in and sign up for the coaching, which the registration hasn't opened yet. And I'll be giving you a coupon code, which will give you 100% off. So,
Yay.
All right. Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Rosa. And do you want to give one more plug for who you are and what you do? Because what she does is amazing.
Thank you, Barb. Yes, so I'm a virtual assistant. I help solo professionals with project management needs and administrative work. Thank you so much, Barb, for having me tonight. It's always fun. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
And looking forward to the next webinar.
Right. Great. And I bet I'm the only one that's actually having you co-host their webinars. All right. Thank you so much, friends. Have a fantastic Thanksgiving and enjoy those healthy boundaries. Bye now.
Bye.